against us. Faithfulness is the word.
My religion compels me, and I love it for it, to be against discrimination of any kind in our country.
Our rights come from nature and God, not from government.
All God asks of you is faithfulness, faithfulness, faithfulness.
Fighting for the family, standing for the church, laboring to return to a moral and biblically based culture.
This is the American Family Association at AFA Today.
Welcome to New York. It is a broadcast some 35 years in the making, started by one of the voices you hear in that opening every day, Don Wildman. But Kevin McCullough, glad to be with you in the middle of the day now, and looking forward to getting you caught up to date on everything that you care about. And in the last 24 hours, something going down in Washington, D.C. that I'm not sure many people would have envisioned happening. But because it does have such long-range ramifications for the political scene, it seemed to me to be very important for us to talk about. Kevin McCullough is my name. Welcome to a brand new broadcast. We're going to go right to Washington, D.C., because the political editor for townhall.com joins us from Washington. Guy Benson. Guy, welcome. We're glad you're with us.
Hi, Kevin. It's good to be here.
I know you got a busy day on your plate because we spoke earlier, but the story breaking last night, Bob Woodward's piece kind of describing what's in Robert Gates's brand new book, evidently has lit Washington, D.C. On fire from one end of Capitol Hill to the other. As the political editor for townhall.com, what is your assessment of the news that has been made from what former Secretary of Defense Gates put in his memoir?
Yeah, well, everyone's talking about it, and it's very cold here in Washington, but as you said, this is a super hot story, particularly because Secretary Gates, and just as background, he has served every president dating back to Richard Nixon, with the one exception of Bill Clinton, across both sides of the political spectrum, Democrats, Republicans. He was President Bush's defense secretary after Rumsfeld, and then he was retained by President Obama, and he served as the Secretary of Defense for about 2.5 years in the Obama administration. He is someone who is widely respected in Washington, D.C., and has credibility and is viewed as a man of integrity across all political divides. This is someone that is well-liked and highly thought of. And so for him to come out in a new memoir, which is forthcoming, and to be as critical of the Obama administration in certain elements as he has, he's sort of also viewed as a very sort of laid-back, low-drama type of person who's not excitable. You know, he is
right.
By no means seen as, certainly as a partisan, or even as someone who can be ruffled by very much at all. So to have and read some of these seething accounts that he relays in his new book, which is going to be called Duty, as described by Bob Woodward in his Washington Post story, is a bit eye-opening, I'd say, to say the least.
And one of the things about Secretary Gates that I think made him popular was that he was the anti-Rumsfeld. In terms of you could get under Secretary Rumsfeld's skin a little bit. You could get him excited about things. You could get him to say bold things. Secretary Gates was very low profile when it came to how he conducted his office. So it was.
Right. Whether you like, you're right. Whether you like Rumsfeld or not, he was dramatic at times. He was flamboyant. He was a big personality. He was opinionated. He was going to say exactly what he thought. And by comparison, Gates, under President Bush and Obama, was much more staid and steady and unlikely to make headlines with some sort of dramatic statement.
Yeah, and I was a personal fan of Rumsfeld, so it wasn't that I was criticizing him, but they are just a contrast. Right. Let me ask you about some of the bigger charges that have been leaked and we know about. The idea that Joe Biden was almost ready to leave his post, that he's never made a proper decision when it comes to foreign policy. That's pretty big. That's a pretty big claim.
Yeah, I mean, that was just one of the claims in the book, and it's not even a claim. It was just an opinion flat out stated by Gates in the book, saying that Joe Biden's been wrong on virtually every foreign policy and national security issue in the last 40 years. That is not high praise, obviously. And there are certainly members of the administration who it sounds like Gates really grew to detest, Biden being one of them. And
Sure.
I think that the bigger revelations in the book are that we've heard of so far are twofold. First, on the issue of Afghanistan and the president's Afghanistan policy, Gates writes that he became convinced very early on that Obama really wanted no part of Afghanistan,
Right.
and that he didn't even believe in his own Afghanistan policy. He ordered that 30,000 additional troop surge in Afghanistan to try to win what Democrats had categorized as the good war in Afghanistan. The whole argument was, that's the war that we really have to win. Iraq was a distraction, so he had to stand behind his campaign rhetoric. He ordered the 30,000 troops into harm's way, but Gates said it was very clear, even before the order came down, that Obama didn't think it would work, thought it would fail, and didn't believe in it himself, and was never really committed to it as the commander-in-chief, and that his primary goal, in Gates' estimation, was just to get out. And that's a very serious charge.
Let's walk that back just for a second, because if people will remember, and Guy, correct me if I get it wrong, but the original request that Petraeus had put forward for that surge was closer to 80,000.
Yeah.
The 40,000 was the number that everybody thought would be reasonable, that they could still do some sort of job. Obama came up short of that with the final placement. I don't think it took somebody on the inside sitting there going, well, he's not really committed to this. I mean, this is something that you could kind of see in that he was playing his hand in. The difference being, now you know from the guy that was at the discussion that there wasn't a heartfelt commitment that this had to be done the right way. And a lot of people, Guy, speculated at the time, if you go in with too few, you end up losing more than you may have if you go in with a much bigger surge. We ended up seeing some pretty deadly months in terms of American losses following the surge that Obama put in there. And some people have argued that it was because we had too few people there.
Yeah, and you can argue about the strategic decisions and the tactical decisions and how many troops it should have been. The fact of the matter is, ultimately, the commander-in-chief decided 30,000 troops, troop surge, this is my policy. And someone who is extremely well respected and not known for exaggeration or tall tale telling, he has come out in this book and pretty much flatly said the president didn't believe in his own policy. And there might be a lot of Americans who are tired of war who say, you know what, I don't blame Obama for being focused on getting us out of there. Maybe just sticking around in this part of the world for a long stretch of time is the wrong thing, and Obama was right about that. Well, I think you can make that case, but if you're the commander-in-chief and you decide to deploy 30,000 troops to a very dangerous place with a stated goal that is your policy, you owe it to those troops to believe in the mission that you're ordering.
Yeah,
so I
and
think
by the way,
that is a very significant piece of this book. And the other one, Kevin, just really quick,
sure,
is an anecdote that he tells over the course of the memoir, where he was in the room when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were talking about Iraq, and they both privately, but in this conversation, conceded and admitted that their opposition to the ultimately successful Iraq surge was rooted in Democratic presidential politics, where they pretty much took the positions that they did on the surge because of the fact that they were running in a Democratic primary for president. And you can chalk that up again to something that a lot of us suspected, that seemed like if you put if you sort of followed the breadcrumbs, that is what the incentive was. But now here is an actual account from, again, this highly respected individual confirming that they were cynically playing partisan politics with the United States war effort as presidential candidates.
We're speaking with Guy Benson. He's the political editor at townhall.com, and we're talking about Bob Woodward's revelation yesterday in the Washington Post that former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates had some really bold insights that he revealed in his upcoming memoir. It's due out the 14th of January. Guy, in terms of Hillary running for president, how does what Mr. Gates has revealed here impact her? Does it matter at all because he's a former Bush administration member as well, or is this something that will actually have some sort of impact?
Well, I think it will have an impact just because, first of all, he was actually pretty praiseworthy of Hillary Clinton in other parts of the book about the job that she did representing the country and his interactions with her. He did express real disappointment in the way that she was cavalierly basically talking about how she had played politics on the Iraq War to try to keep up with Barack Obama in appeasing the anti-war factions of the party in 2007 and 2008. So I think that is certainly a level of political calculation and cynicism that will get attention and that will stick with her if she decides to run for president. Whether it will blow up into a huge thing remains to be seen, but that certainly doesn't portray her in a particularly good light. So I think that a lot of people are going down that path, wondering how this could potentially affect her presidential bid if it happens. And it's tough to say, a revelation in a book that comes out in early 2014, how's that going to play in late 2015 and 2016? It certainly fuels a narrative that is unhelpful to her, and the White House is pushing back last night saying, oh no, you don't believe this. It's the president highly respects Joe Biden. He's an invaluable resource on difficult decisions, and they're really trying to dismiss a lot of the critiques. Another critique, by the way, from Gates is that many high-ranking officials in the administration, including the president and vice president, often treated ranking military leaders with suspicion and sometimes just outright disrespect. So they're trying to push back against all of that. But to your point, it's not like the left or Democrats can just simply say, oh, he's a Bush guy, of course he's going to do this. He served President Obama for 2.5 years. He has a sterling reputation in Washington, D.C. He's been favorably cited as an example of bipartisanship and bridging the gap by Democrats. So It's tough to turn him overnight into a right-wing smear merchant, especially since he chose not to come out with these revelations before the election where they could have said, look, it's politically timed. And I think that there's a case to be made that he maybe should have, and voters had a right to know about these things before the president was reelected. But the timing of this, I think, makes it even more difficult to cast this as some sort of vendetta or politically motivated screed.
And I think that the kind words that he says towards the end about even President Obama and the respect that he has for him on different levels, I think all of that adds to the weight of the punch that he lands on these charges specifically. Guy Benson, political editor of townhall.com. One last thing, the revelations, of course, will run the news gamut today. But the idea that Mr. Gates wasn't at all associated with the government when Benghazi happened, one thing that's run through my head is I wonder if he had been Secretary of Defense that night on 9/11/2012, if we would have not seen a very different reaction from the Washington establishment, knowing that we have so few questions answered as to where the president was, as to exactly why Hillary didn't call anybody back, and evidently Mr. Panetta was not really that helpful. It seems to me that Secretary Gates was a person sorely missed on that evening.
There were a lot of things sorely missed on that evening and leading up to that evening, and the reasons for those massive shortcomings are still unclear.
Yeah.
And as it happens, I'm writing a piece right now for townhall.com about a Washington Post story that's just been published indicating that there is a direct al-Qaeda link, a particular network and a particular individual that the Washington Post is reporting on that once again seems to debunk the controversial New York Times revisionist account that we were all talking about last week.
It'll be interesting to watch. Guy Benson, political editor, townhall.com. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I'm Kevin McCullough. This is AFR Talk and AFA Today. Stay with us.